Hey guys, Chris from the Ultimate Recycler. Welcome back to the channel. On the bench today we have a vintage Sony CRT television, probably around 1990s, maybe 2000, not too sure. We'll check it out though. It's the Trinitron, which is, as far as CRTs go, it's one of the more desirable for people that are into the old CRTs, like retro gamers and people that are nostalgic about TVs. This one turned up in the e-waste quite some time ago, and I put it in the van to bring it home. It then sat in the van for 6 weeks under a blanket right at the front, and it even did a trip to the farm and back. It just became part of the van furniture. We have to deal with it. I'm really getting on a bit of a run now of making progress in my shed, and the van's been cleaned out because my girls have borrowed it to go and pick up some stuff for the cafe. So here it is on the bench. It's got a problem. I'll show you what it's doing and we'll see if we can fix it. Without any further ado, let's turn it on and I'll show you what it's doing. Now, it fires up fine. We have sound, but the picture has a fairly solid white line right across the middle of it. So I believe it's something to do with the vertical control of the picture, obviously. It's like all the picture is just concentrated on one line. Now, I've been doing some reading and there's a few common faults with these units that causes this. The most common is probably capacitors, which in this era they were often very cheap capacitors and didn't last, so we'll have a look at the circuit board for any damaged capacitors. The other thing is dry solder joints from poor quality solder. So I believe those two faults are by far the most common. I'm not a CRT technician, but I reckon we can have a go at fixing this. Let's pull it apart and have a look. So I think there's only 4 screws to remove the entire back cover. So there's the cover off. Let's have a look at the boards. Wow, it's certainly very, very dusty. So I could do with a bit of a blowout from the air compressor. So we're going to have to slide that bottom board out. I think they're usually accessible quite easily. Unplug a few wires and the whole board will slide out. So we'll put the TV back up to its normal orientation and we'll start checking some things. Now, since we've had our TV just on only a few minutes ago, we do need to make sure that there's no residual power here. I don't know how accurate this is or not, but someone said you need to short out this wire. I believe it drains static electricity away from the screen when it's running, but someone mentioned it can hold a charge, so I'm just earthing it back out to the chassis to make sure there's no charge there. If that's incorrect, well, so be it, let me know, but at least we've done it. There'll be power in the capacitors on the main board, so we'll have to be careful of that as well. You can't just assume that there's no electricity just because you've unplugged it from the mains. Alright, so I think it should be right to unplug some wires now and slide the main board out and start checking out the capacitors and to see if there's any bad solder joints that we can physically notice. Most things are unplugged now. There's a couple of little plastic lugs just to flex out of the road, and that will allow us to slide the whole main board out. And we've just got another plug here. And I think we're just about right to completely remove that board now. We still have this wire going to the main picture tube. I don't know if it unplugs from the flyback transformer. And I don't know about unhooking it from the screen. So we've got enough length we can leave it there. Slide the board out and have a good look at the board. So I'll just unplug some of these wiring looms that I've unplugged from the other end. It just gives us a bit more room to work and less things to get in the road of our inspection. I'm going to get my air compressor here and just blow this board off because it's absolutely filthy and it's a bit hard to inspect parts, and certainly it will be hard to inspect the solder joints until we have it fairly clean. It's also a good idea to film this just so that when you're reassembling you can see exactly where all the wires go. So the only wires we've got are the ones from the flyback transformer. One goes to the little CRT board and the other one goes to the picture tube. So I've just had my air compressor going and I've cleaned it all out and it looks a lot neater and we can actually see what's on the board now. So disappointingly, all the capacitors look okay. I was hoping to see some bulged on the top, which is very common in these older electronics. and then it's really easy to say, aha, that's the problem. But they all look all right. So I've disconnected everything else now. I've managed to get this clip off the back of the picture tube. It's just 2 spring-loaded clips there. So now I can take the board separately into my other little room where the light's a bit better, and I can have a really good look at it all. We could possibly test a few of the capacitors, and we'll have a good look at the circuits underneath, because I did read on a forum that one of the faults with these Sonys is that they're really susceptible to dry solder joints or poor connections. So hopefully that's what we find. So just having another look in here, and as I said with the capacitors, the tops all look good. You often see them with a bulged top, and the moment you spot that, you know it's bad and needs replacing. It's not a yes or no situation. Just because these look good doesn't mean the caps are okay. Sometimes they can leak around the base, but these ones all look pretty clean. So we're looking at all the electrolytic capacitors because that's a known weak link. So that's the first thing to look at. But as I said before, everything looks all right. There's no staining of the board from any leakages. There's no bulged ones. So, all right, so that's the first thing to check. Now, let's turn it over. Oh, the other thing I guess to scan is just to make sure there's no other scorched parts, no burnt out resistors. You know, you'll see if there's been a serious issue. Although the fact that the tally was still working, we just have a vertical stabilization issue, would probably indicate that there's going to be no major fused parts. More likely, I think we're going to find, or hopefully we're going to find, a bad connection underneath. Now, I'm not too sure which part of the board controls the vertical screen. A few videos I watched, they all sort of identified which part of the board it was. I don't know if it's actually written under here. And I know a lot of them referred to one of the ICs that controls the vertical deflection. So I guess we need to identify which one it is. I'll get my magnifying glass out and we'll have a bit of a read of anything we can see on the board. So there's a large IC there. I think that's the main processor one. I don't know that that's the one we're going to be looking at. Immediate impressions are that soldering all looks okay. It's a little discoloured around this area. So the combination of poor quality solder and a board that heats up and cools down and heats up and cools down can give you what they call a dry joint, or a poor connection. So that's what I've got to look for. Give me a while and I'll do some inspections, see if I can find anything. Okay guys, here's a close-up of the board. Hopefully you can see here. Now I've been over it with a magnifying glass, having a good look at all the contacts, and I found one here. Now where are we? Found one here that's definitely corroded. All right, now I think this IC here is the something to do with the vertical deflection. I haven't looked up any numbers, but from some of the other videos I saw, that's the type of IC it is. And if we look up here, there's an electrolytic capacitor there. The board looks a little scungy and there's definitely corrosion. In fact, you can see it flaking off. I think that's actually eaten through the track. And I just had the meter on there. And from this pin here, we don't have continuity to this pin, which is this capacitor. So I'm going to have to repair this track. It's pretty obvious that that's damaged there, or scrape away all the corrosion. Rather than, I think the track's actually gone, the copper. I'll probably just put just a jumper link from this pin through to this pin of the capacitor. But given that it's likely leakage from this capacitor, we're going to have to replace this, which is C552. So I'll take that one out, we'll test it, and I'll have to find a replacement. And we'll solder that in. Hopefully we've got enough copper track here to solder this pin to, and then I'll put a jumper wire through to here. Hopefully that's all the problem is. Okay, let's pull this little one out. We melt the solder here. In fact, we'll put some solder onto the joint first. That often helps to desolder them. Okay, now we should be able to remove that solder. That's good. And we'll do the other side. Same again, we might have to add a bit of solder. Okay, we should be able to pull that. It's a bit hard to get to, it's inside this heatsink here. I'll have to get some pliers onto that. I think both the leads are loose. There we go. Let's have a look at what it is. Hopefully I've got a replacement. We got a focus there. It's a 50 volt 100 UF, and if we look at the base, it's certainly been leaking. It's a little bulgy at the base, so I'm pretty sure it's no good. Let's put it on the tester anyway and see what it says. So I've got a few tests I can do. I bought this little gadget ages ago off eBay, and it's kind of handy. And it identifies parts, which is handy too, especially for beginners to electronics, which I still consider myself a beginner. Let's put this in here. And we've got a 9-volt battery. We'll hook that up. And we'll give it a test and see what the machine says. I wonder if it'll register as a capacitor. Depends how badly blown it is. Oh, look, it registers. Let's do that again, testing again. So it knows it's a capacitor, but I think it said 78. No, now it's 99. Well, 99 microfarads is right, or very, very close to it. So now it says 128 microfarads. All right, let's test it again. Oh, it's doing it automatically. So let's see what it comes up with this time. 134. It's going up in capacitance. Well, clearly it's got an issue, but it isn't a direct short and it isn't an open circuit. Let's do it one more time. So it's certainly got a problem, and it has been leaking, which is what's caused the corrosion. Last test, 143. It's going up in capacitance all the time. So it's obviously no good. Let's put it on the ESR meter and see if it has any excessive resistance. Ah, now it actually says unknown or damaged part. Interesting. Okay, let's try the ESR meter. We'll zero it out first. And this is to see how much resistance we have within a capacitor. There should be very, very low resistance, if not zero. And we have a little chart here to read off. So we'll connect this up to the right terminals and see what it tells us. It's open circuit. Alright, so we should have had a resistance figure there, but we have an open circuit. So it's doing all sorts of silly buggers. It's got corrosion on one lead, I've noticed, so it's probably an intermittent connection as well as leaking. So without a doubt, it's no good. Let's see if we've got a replacement. Isn't this always the way? You buy an assortment of capacitors thinking you'll always be right for one, and a second time in a row, I don't have one that's close enough to use. It does have 100 microfarad capacitors, but they only go to 25 volts. The one we've got needs to be 50 volts, so we can't go below that. We could put a higher one, but not a lower one. I have to have a look at some of the scrap boards I've got and see if we've got one that tests out okay to use. I just dragged this large board out of my tub to go to the e-waste transfer station, and I found one, 100 microfarad, 50 volts. Perfect. We'll pull this one out of this board and test it. Let's put that in our little tester and see what it thinks of that one. Okay, 103 microfarads, pretty good, and it gives us an ESR figure, but we'll check it on our other meter and see. But it looks like this one's a good one to use. Okay, our ESR is 0.01, which should be perfectly fine. We have a threshold of around about 0.03 is fine, so that's acceptable. Good, we can put this in and hopefully finish our job. Before we put it in, we'll just clean up around the base of it with some IPA. It's obviously leaked a bit of its corrosive gunk onto the board. Hasn't really affected the top, but let's clean it up anyway. And we'll have to clean up underneath. So I'll clean up around here as well. And we'll give this a bit of a scrub with a toothbrush to make sure it's nice and clean. Get all that corrosion off. Okay, let's fit this capacitor back in, making sure we get the polarity the right way. Bend our lead so it doesn't fall out. And we can solder that in. Now I can see after a clean up that there is no copper trace left there at all, so we will have to put a link over to that pin there. If the capacitor lead was long enough, I'd just about put some heat shrink tubing on it and then bend it across, but I'll have to have a little wire link across. Let's neaten up those pins. Now let's solder our little jumper lead in position. Okay, that's a neater job, and we'll just check the continuity across there. Very good. And it's not going on to any of the other circuits. That's fine. I've also reflowed the solder just along the pins of this IC because I've seen some videos where you get dry joints along that IC. So whilst I had the iron going, I've just reflowed all the joints there. Our capacitor is installed nice and neatly. We've fixed that broken track. I think we should be ready for a test. Okay, I think I have all the wiring back where it goes. It's handy videoing the dismantle process because you have a reference to check back on. I haven't hooked any of the wires back up into their sort of proper positions, but it's all plugged in. I've just slid the board back in. So the moment of truth, let's apply some power. Stand back, and hopefully we have no smoke. Okay, and if we reach around to the front of the TV and operate the power switch, promising. No sparks, no lightning, no smoke. I can hear sound. Let's go and have a look at the screen. Damn it, we haven't got anywhere. Still got that same line. And I guess that's why you don't reassemble everything as if it's fixed. As soon as you can test it with minimal work, you test it. Obviously that capacitor was no good, but it must have another fault, whether it's a dodgy connection or another capacitor. We're going to have to go back and check it. Okay, I've been back to the drawing board for some time. A little disappointing. I really thought I had this problem fixed, and I've been studying the board. I did wonder if a diode here needed testing. Are we still in the shot here? Maybe not quite. Just where I did this repair. This diode I thought might have shorted out, and I'm getting weird readings on it, but I would probably have to pull out one pin, lift one leg of it to test it. And I was just about to do that, and I noticed over here there's a variable resistor of some sort. It's got a control up on top, and if I give you a super close zoom in, hopefully we still stay focused. Alright, there's a good focus, and have a look at that. I was just poking around looking, and I saw a bit of movement where I didn't think I should. See that crack around that leg? You can see the cracks there to the solder, and if I get the pliers on it, it's actually loose. Look at that. And same with the other one. So that won't be helping things. So I'll resolder those in, and I think we'll give it another test before I start lifting other parts. Hopefully the thing's only got two problems. I've obviously fixed the first problem. Let's fix this problem, and hopefully we're a goer. Okay, she's back together, ready for test number 2. Oh, the switch must have still been on. It powered up straight away. We have sound, we have no smoke, we have no fire, we have no explosions. Let's go and look at the screen. Cross everything for me this time, guys. Oh no, there's still another fault. Back to the drawing board again. Okay guys, back on the drawing board again. Now I've lifted the leg on this diode and I tested it, and it's fine. It has current that will flow one way and not the other, which is what a diode does. So it appears to be okay. I did have the meter on the bottom of these terminals on this IC, which I reflowed earlier, and one of them was appearing to not make a good connection, and it was a little loose. So when I reflowed it, I think it was, I don't know which terminal it was now, so I think it was this one here. I reflowed the solder and it obviously took around the leg, but it still didn't connect properly to the circuit board, so it had a bit of a wobble. So that doesn't count as a third problem. It might have been one of the initial problems as well relating to this issue, but I obviously didn't reflow the solder properly. So it seems they all seem to be solid and connecting now. So given that that's something else that wasn't quite right, I think we're allowed to go for a third test. Now, is it wrong of me to be already thinking about where I'll look next? That's a little bit of a defeatist attitude, isn't it? Let's hit the power switch. All good so far again. Our sound's coming back. How many more issues can there be? Damn it, there's at least one more. Well guys, it's the next morning. I've had a good sleep. I think I dreamt of circuit boards. I've had a freshly caffeinated brain this morning and I attacked this circuit board once again. Thought I found another bad solder joint, fixed that up, put it back in, and we have exactly the same symptoms. So I'm going to call this video now. It's going to be a fail. You've heard the expression of flogging a dead horse. Well, yes, this horse appears to be dead, and I've certainly been flogging it, but and with no results. However, I hold out hope that sometime in the future I will learn enough about CRTs to work out what's wrong with this. So because it's a good TV, a Sony Trinitron, I think it's going to appreciate in value. I'm going to put it back together. I'll post this video and I'll have to find somewhere to store this for now. So guys, I'm going to post this video because it's a way that I can preserve what I've done to this TV without me losing it by accidentally deleting a folder. If any of you are a lot more experienced at TV repairs than myself, which probably wouldn't be hard, by all means suggest what I might tackle next. The only thing I can think of is maybe just replacing all the capacitors. I did test quite a number around that area of the circuit I thought was at fault, and they all seemed to test okay, but I didn't pull them off the board. Maybe I just need to recap the whole TV. Maybe there's another dry solder joint somewhere. It's a little frustrating because I did actually find faults. I replaced a cap that was definitely no good. I repaired a bit of circuit board track that was clearly corroded away. So 2 definite fixes. I also did find some dry solder joints, as pointed out, that definitely had to be fixed. So I have successfully fixed a few problems, but the TV still does the same thing. So anyway, if you've got through this video, you're probably more interested in TVs than anything else. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. If I do sort out this TV down the track, I'll be sure to link it to the end of this one. Catch you in the next video. Bye for now, guys.